Mine is the only voice.
Wow.
What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey everyone, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening on those podcast platforms, get your butt over to YouTube because I have 4 gorgeous curly-haired ladies who are here to talk about their upbringing. This is our 300th episode. I seriously cannot believe it. It blows my mind. I can't believe we've been doing this many. That's not even including the lives. So it's a really big deal. This is our 3rd panel. If you want to support further, we have channel memberships where we are doing members only live streams. We're doing early access to some of our videos and some behind the scenes content. You can join for as little as like $4 a month if that interests you to support the show. And actually, one of the people on today, Chavie, she was in our OG set, our bedroom set. So like 3 sets ago, she's our top performing video, 1.5 million. Chavie, we did our interview with you, I realized, on May 1st, 3 years ago. And it's so interesting, the date, because I'm actually due with my second baby on May 1st. So it's like a very full circle moment. So cool to have you back on. We have Beatrice here today too, who is our 3rd top performing video, and a couple newer ladies who recently were on the channel. So I'll introduce all of them, but I just wanted to say the significance of today's episode and why I'm so excited. And I think this is a topic that seems to be needed right now. Based on the comments, a lot of people were very excited to hear from ladies who have come from various Orthodox communities and how they are doing now. So we are going to be hearing from all their different perspectives, and I'm going to let each and every one of them say exactly where they came from, the sect that they grew up in, so that we have a full understanding of what we're covering today. So in no particular order, we have Chavie Weisberger. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes, we have Beatrice Weber. Thank you.
So good to be here.
We have Murrin. Thanks for coming back.
Yes. Hi. Thank you. And thanks, Shalise, again for having me back and for what you do.
Absolutely. And we have Raquel, someone who you just saw because we just had her on like a week ago. We came back for a live, and then the next day I was like, want to join a panel? So
Yeah, I
love
this
having
is
you
like
back.
my new thing. I'll be sad when it's over.
Oh, you're now a resident at Cults to Consciousness. So ladies, I really appreciate you coming on and being willing to dive back into these hard topics. I have 10 prompts here today, and how this is going to work for everybody watching is we're just going to go through these prompts. I'm going to allow whoever wants to speak on these topics, whether it applies to them or not. This could also apply to someone they've seen in the community or a close friend, family member. So we're going to be discussing the hardships of growing up in a society with very strict gender roles and patriarchy, and ultimately a lot of control, and how that affected them and how they've been able to change their lives around and become who they are today. So let's just start with how we introduced. Chavie, can you tell everybody where you are from?
Yes. Hi, I'm Chavie. I use she, her pronouns. I was raised in the Hasidic community called Emunas Yisrael. It's not a very well-known community. They're based in Brooklyn, although I was born and raised in a small town in Rockland County called Muncie. The sect that I was raised in, it was also founded and led by my grandfather, my maternal grandfather. So it's kind of a smallish sect, but I was very much like raised in the lap of it. For those who know a little bit more about Hasidic communities, Emunas Yisrael has some kind of a weird marriage between some of the ideology of Chabad Lubavitch and some of the ideology of New Square, like Skver Hasidus. And so there's a very interesting combination of different ways this impacted me, and I'm sure I'll talk more about it as we move forward.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so Beatrice.
Yeah, hi. I grew up in Toronto in the Hasidic community. I'm a mother of 10. I later lived in Israel for 11 years, and then we moved back to Muncie. You know, it's a little bit niche the way I grew up. There doesn't exist much of that anymore, but for lack of a better way of explaining it, it was very closely aligned with how the Satmar community was raised, and, you know, Hungarian but very, very, very strict rules, a lot of them, a lot. But I did go as a young girl to a more Orthodox school rather than a Hasidic school. So a lot of my experience growing up as a young person was really dealing with that.
Okay. And T, how about you?
So I grew up in the small town in Rockland County in Muncie. I was raised more Haredi yeshivish. Went to Beis Yaakov, for those who are more familiar with particulars. So went to Beis Yaakov for elementary school and for high school. Yeah, and that's where I grew up.
Okay, perfect. Is there anything else that you wanted to share quickly about your story before we continue on?
Yeah, I think a big part of my story is the the community that I grew up in and how I was raised within my family in and of itself, where I experienced a lot of childhood sexual abuse, physical abuse. One of seven, and left the community. Started back in 2014. Went into treatment for eating disorder, which we'll get to. But that's when I really started the journey of leaving the community, deconstructing, and working through all of the childhood wounds.
Yeah, thank you. And Raquel.
So I did the flip of Beatrice. I grew up in Israel for almost 12 years and then moved to Toronto. I grew up in a Haredi Litvish like T did. I went to Beis Yaakov. So I would say that I grew up in a pretty mainstream Orthodox. People like to call it ultra Orthodox, but I think it's pretty umbrella of mainstream Orthodox. I got married, have 5 kids, lived all around. I grew up in and then worked in the world of outreach, which is what I call the Jewish missionary branch, but we don't missionize outside our faith. So we just try to encourage other Jews to become more religious and get more involved. And I left about 5 years ago.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So for those watching, if this is your first time on the channel, or maybe you're not familiar with some of these ladies, we have done full, extensive interviews with all of them, which will all be linked in the description. So after this, if you want to know more specifics about anybody's story, it's all there. And all of these prompts, I'm sure, are going to bring out more of their stories so we can learn about them as we go. So let's get started. The first prompt is, what do you remember being the hardest or strictest rules to follow, either as a child or an adult, that took away your freedom or autonomy? Anyone who wants to jump in, go ahead.
I mean, I'm happy to go. And it's really, in retrospect, thinking about it, there were so many rules, as a child and as an adult. For much of that time, I was afraid to break any of the rules. I was a true believer. I left in my mid 40s, and whether there was a lot of denial or whatever, but the fact is I was a believer. But in retrospect, thinking about what were those rules, I think, first of all, for me, like not getting that full education, that has changed my life. My life would be completely different if I would have been able to graduate high school, go to college, and choose a career for myself. So that's just like so basic, but essentially it changed my life forever. And even though I did go to college and I do have an MBA at this point and I have a job, like it could not have compared if I would have been able to kind of use that potential. And then I think those modesty rules that were somehow so normalized, both in childhood, right, in terms of dress from a very, very young age, what type of clothing we were allowed to wear, what type of colors. Of course, I wear red all the time because I was not allowed to wear red. So to me, that's such so symbolic for me. And then all the purity rules as an adult, they were so dehumanizing, and it was just like what you had to do. You couldn't even question it or think about it. And I did it for over 2 decades.
Yeah. And we are going to be getting into both of those topics a little bit later on. So it's great that you brought them up, talking about the modesty rules and more of the purity rules too. So anyone else want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think, just like Beatrice said, I really, especially growing up in Israel where the world around me was religious, I didn't realize that any of it wasn't normal. But one of the things that stood out for me, even from childhood, was a set of laws that we called muktzah. So on Shabbat, there's 39 categories of law that you're not allowed to do and be involved in. So no creative work, crazy things like you can't tear toilet paper. But there's one category called muktzah, which is anything that has no use on Shabbat, you can't touch. So you can't write, which means you can't touch a pencil. You can't use money, you can't touch money. And I remember as a kid thinking, like, don't they trust us? Like, if you're not supposed to use a pencil, like, why do I need that, fence to tell me that I can't touch the pencil? And the answer I got was, well, if you pick it up, you might accidentally draw with it, and we want to protect you from yourself. And even as a little kid, I remember thinking, like, that means I'm not trustworthy to myself, that I can't trust myself, and I need somebody else to keep me protected from my own self. And I think that that's something that was a theme throughout my entire life in the Orthodox community of, you are not trustworthy to yourself. And it definitely started, that idea was I was very aware of it even just from childhood.
Yeah, I think picking back on that, I think, for me also growing up, it was so many of the rules, like, you didn't realize that there was the alternative. So, when I was in it, it wasn't that bad. The rules didn't feel that bad because you're in it and that's all that you know. But when I was thinking about this question, I was like, I think the one thing that stood out, and this was more as in like my older teenage years, was the Sabbath, was Shabbos. And I think I know you said specifically just about muktzah, but I think it was the whole idea of Sabbath, and I would say and kosher. And I think that, I was always been told that the only way you're actually really considered Jewish and observant is if you keep Sabbath and you keep kosher. And I'm like, but what if I just want to turn the light on? Like, all of a sudden now I'm not Jewish, like, because it was more black and white, which you're just not religious. But it was those two differentiating factors that makes you determine if you're religious or not religious. Those, I think, for me were the two hardest, because I would want to like cheat a little bit, right? Or like maybe turn the light on, or maybe like touch the pencil, but it's like, then I'm not religious anymore, and all the bad things after that. So I think for me it's really was those two, Shabbos and kosher, and the extreme in those rules and what it means to keep them versus not keeping them were difficult.
Was it true for everybody that black and white thinking was that extreme, to where even if you mess up once, it's just everything's over? Or was there considered a repentance process if you did accidentally turn on the light or anything?
I can jump in on that. I think that I was raised in like immediate household. There was a lot of room for forgiveness and like a general attitude of like, God, Hashem forgives you and loves you and wants you to get this right. But I was also raised in a larger culture that didn't have that attitude. So I was kind of torn between the sense of like, it's okay, there's a broad sense of love and forgiveness. And then also like at school and in my neighbors and community, like it did feel way harsher and more black and white. And to jump back for a second to what your previous question was, like the stuff pertaining to my body really impacted me. And so rules about the purity laws that Beatrice raised really were so impactful. Like I already thought I had a sense of what the religion expected of me. And then all of a sudden I'm an adult and thrust into this whole new dynamic. And now there's all these, like a whole new set of rules that I think that the ones that I was raised on were just like, okay, this is just what life is. And the ones that got added later, it was like, how very dare you? And the sense of lack of control over my body, like what I wore, and the Sabbath rules, like impact, like brushing your hair, like a hairbrush wasn't allowed. And so those like little bits of like not having control or autonomy over how I kept my body were so deeply impactful for me.
Yeah. I would love to go into the specifics on the purity rules. It seemed like a lot of you had things to say about that. So maybe it's a good time to just focus in on that a little bit more and get more specific. So the prompt is, what is the earliest age you remember learning your body was sinful or could cause others to sin? And how are the modesty or purity rules implemented with young girls in your sect? Chavie, do you want to start first and talk about more of the specifics that really bothered you?
Totally. Yeah. I think I talked about this the last time I did an interview with you. And so I fear being repetitious.
That's okay. Please continue. Just in case anyone hasn't seen it. Well, 1.5 million people have, but just in case anyone hasn't seen it, I would love for this to be a standalone episode so people can be fully looped in.
Okay, totally. So in the culture that I was raised in, modesty laws started at 3 years old. This is not true for all Hasidic communities, but it was very much the norm in my community and in my family. So when you're 3, you have to start like wearing dresses with long sleeves and that hit below the knee, tights instead of socks, like really fully covered up. And this remained true all through adulthood. And there was like a very strong sense of like shame and discomfort in existing in a body. I've been grappling with this a lot lately, just thinking about why I'm still so resistant to like dressing modestly to visit family, or people say, just do it for respect, like go back there and wear the clothes that will make them feel comfortable. In a lot of ways, I've been willing to be more flexible in some of my black and white boundaries now, like as time has passed, but the modesty thing still feels like so traumatic and like such an ask on just giving up a sense of ownership over a body that I worked really hard to finally have ownership of.
Yeah, absolutely. Beatrice, did you want to chime in on this? Because you had mentioned purity laws as well.
Yeah, I mean, so I started wearing tights when I was 9, so it was a little bit later. But the long sleeves and everything started at 3, and I think those rules were just rules. I don't think I thought much about it, or I don't think it felt shameful when I was little. It was just what we did, right? And everybody around me did it. Though I remember at 9, my cousins had been wearing tights since they were 3. And it was like, I was like, oh, I felt like, oh, I should be doing more of that, right? I should be kind of even more stricter. But I remember like an incident that happened when I was 12 that like it shook me up a lot. And really, so I was 12 and I walked in, we used to have a lot of guests. So my parents used to, our Shabbat dinners would have like men coming, they would come for charity, to collect charity in Toronto. And then my parents would often host like a dozen men around our table. And I remember once going into the table, into the room where all the men were sitting. And I was 12, dressed like 100% modesty, all the things. And then I remember my father saying something, I think she's too old to come in. And I remember feeling, I don't know, so weird, like such a betrayal. Like I'm doing like literally everything right. I'm dressed like as modestly, following every single rule. And somehow there's still something like wrong with my body, right? There's still something wrong with my very presence. So I recently like remembered that and remembered like how much that meant to me. And then the purity rules, as Chavie mentioned, was a whole extra layer that like nothing, you're not told about any of that. Like literally was clueless that there was something different that would start once I got married in regards to, rules around my body. So that was like a whole other level of shock. I didn't question it because I was at 18. I was at a stage where I was very obedient and I was just like, tell me what I need to do and I'll do it and I'll be good and I'll, make everybody happy. Like that was, we can talk about how I got there, but I didn't question it, but it also was very intense.
Yeah. Was there anything more specific about the purity rules that you wanted to mention?
I was married for 22 years, right? So for 22 years, like I kept those rules. And, when you talk about the black and white thinking, right? It was like, you couldn't break any of those rules, right? Because like, if you got pregnant and weren't observing the rules, like your child would not be considered whole with God, right? There was all that. So there was fear, but there was also kind of spiritual connection, like intertwined in all of this. And it was extremely intrusive, for lack of a better word, right? It involved showing your underwear to a rabbi. It involved, needing to do a whole internal inspection. I mean, I had a time where I had to visit a woman in Muncie in her basement to be checked as to why I was continuing to have, vaginal bleeding. And she was on the phone with a rabbi reporting back, like not a medical professional, Thank goodness at that time I was already seeing a therapist outside of the community. And she was like, what is going on? Like, go to a doctor. But this was just, my body was just something to be used in pursuit of something bigger and more. And, we can talk about how my children as well were meant for that bigger purpose. I believe very much now, in retrospect, but definitely my body was, that was clear. It wasn't my own.
A couple things that I want to say. For starters, there's so many people in the comments on all of our videos. That wasn't my experience and she's not saying it correctly. And that's not what it's really like. I listened to all of your episodes and each one of us described the laws of Nida, which are the family purity laws, the exact same way, the same little cotton cloth, the same vaginal checks, the same mikvah dunking in the water process. And I thought, we come from such different versions of sect and we all were so respectful and careful to say, this is my experience, this is my community. I'm not speaking for everybody. And at the same time I was watching that, I thought, but it's all of us at the same time. Like every version of Orthodox community has these laws. They're there, different intensity, different strictness of it, but the baseline of them, and they're such intrusive, harmful laws. So to all the apologetics in the comments, guys, we all went through it, and you're going through it. It's just when it's couched and painted as this beautiful, holy thing, we can put our discomfort offline and lean into like, but God wants this for me, and this is holy, and I'm supposed to do this. And that's really harmful. The other thing I wanted to speak to was the question about when did, you said it so eloquently about how soon did you realize that the modesty laws are problematic? To the same as Beatrice and Chavie said, you don't really notice that it's oppressive because everybody around you is doing it. But I very distinctly remember I went to Beis Yaakov in Toronto High School. My gym teacher was not religious, beautiful blonde curly hair. I was like half in love with her. And we had swimming. I think it was 10th grade. And I remember her, and she was Israeli. I spoke Hebrew. So we had this like cute little, like, we would like chit chat about all the girls in Hebrew. Probably not a cool thing to do, but, and the girls were all changing into their bathing suit. I always made sure that I had my period so I didn't have to get in the water because I didn't want to. And so we would stand on the side and talk. And she said to me, it's so sad to watch how much shame these girls have around their bodies, around other women. Because the girls would like get out of the shower, get out in their bathing suits, and they would stand like this and get into the water as fast as they could. And this is around other women. And that struck me so deeply as, yeah, like, why are our bodies shameful? And we think they're shameful because we're told to cover up, presented as you're the daughter of the king, and it's like royalty, and it's, protecting your virtue and all these lovely comments. But at the end of the day, an adult pointing out to me the shame around our bodies at 14 and 15 years old was very stark.
Yeah. T, did you want to jump in on any of this stuff too?
Yeah, I think, there's so much that brought up, but I think one thing that really stood out was when it comes to, like you said, the swimming pool. And we would have a pool. We had a pool in our backyard, and the men are allowed to swim and wear whatever they want. But the women, whenever they would come swimming and use our backyard, there couldn't be any, like my brothers couldn't be home, my dad couldn't be home. The times would have to be very specific because men are not allowed to see women in their bathing suit, but women can see men in their bathing suit. And even the women, a lot of them would come and they would wear their like Schwimmkleid, what I don't even know anymore what it's called, but they would wear their
bathing suit dress,
like a bathing suit dress, right? But because either it can still be form-fitting, or sometimes they wouldn't actually wear stockings with it, the men still couldn't be home. So, because they would then be able to see that a little bit of their skin, or they were at risk for that. So I think that there's so much of where it comes to like that, not so to say, not fairness, where the men have so much more freedom and so much more autonomy and can do so much more than the women can, even when it comes to your body, expressing your body, and things related to that.
Yeah, I have one more. They were talking about when you get married, the new purity laws, but hair covering is something that I feel sad I didn't mention yet in my other interviews. So all the modesty laws start at 3, 6, 9, whatever age in your community, and stay through adulthood. But then something gets added when you get married, which is covering your hair. And that for me was one of the hardest things. It was one of the hardest things I had to do, to cover my hair. Some communities do wigs, some don't do wigs. I was in a community where we wore wigs. And even though it looked beautiful and most people couldn't tell, I knew that it wasn't mine. It's like you wake up in the morning, you get dressed, and you put on your costume. You put on I belong to God. I belong to my husband. I don't belong to myself. It's a pleasure to not have to cover my hair.
Yeah. And all of you have such gorgeous curly hair. Did anyone else feel a certain kind of way about hiding their curls?
Very much. Not so much hiding the curls, because I didn't like my curly hair when I was growing up. It was not cool to have curly hair back then. Straight hair was way more trendy. And my curly hair was just, out of control, not modest, just innately in its existence.
Did you get in trouble for it all the time?
I didn't, because I was just
because I did.
Oh yeah, I was not cool, so like nothing about me raised any attention. I just had it all like tied up in a ponytail, and like I just tried to like contain. But In my community, when we got married, we shaved our hair off and then put a wig on top of it. And that really impacted me. I think already I didn't have a great relationship with my body, and like what you were described, Raquel, like that feeling of like, I am putting on my like costume to be a good wife, to be a good person for God or whatever. I think I always felt that. My whole life felt like I was in a performance. I was very outside of my body a lot. And so the added layer of not having my hair was just like, I guess we do that too. And I just kind of like rolled with it. It was only afterwards, once I fully like deconstructed, allowed myself to grow my hair back, it really started to dawn on me how powerful that was, that they took that from me, that they really like dehumanized me in that way. And it did make me feel like, I remember going to amusement park and people would like, even like religious Jews, but who didn't shave their hair, were able to like take their wig off and put something else on that they felt comfortable in, or I don't know. I don't want to speak for their experience, but I felt so outside of that experience. I felt like my body just shouldn't exist around people in this way. And so I'm still like kind of trying to get in touch with my body in this way. That's like an ongoing process, and my hair too. And that's a big piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, I can just like piggyback on that. And, you know, I grew up in, my mother and mother-in-law did not shave their hair. They cut it very, very short. But I did start shaving my head a year and a half into my marriage. And to be honest, it was only in retrospect after I left that I felt what it actually did to me. While I was doing it, I was I survived by being very much, you know, my emotions were frozen. I was just doing what I had to do, a lot of denial. But like in retrospect, doing that for like 20 years, right? Covering my hair for 25 years. And, you know, there was a lot of shame around my hair when I was a child as well. So I was somebody who's like, you had big curly hair, uncontrollable. It was not going to, you know, and so I had to cut really, really short when I was very young. So I have kind of memories of that as well. So, I mean, I just love wearing my hair big and curly. And actually, like, we noted when we came in that we all have like nice big curly hair, which is amazing. And that's one of my proudest moments. And I know this is like jumping ahead, but when my daughter got married, I was still in the community. And before she got engaged, there was a question, like part of the condition of her getting engaged was, would she shave her head? And it was like, mom shaves her head. It's like, okay, right, no problem. And then I went to her the next morning and she like started crying. And even though I was still in the community, and even though I was still shaving my head at that point, it was 3 years before I left my marriage, I didn't. I said, you know what, you don't have to do this. And I don't think she ever shaved her head. So I'm very proud of that.
Yay.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I think this kind of ties into the next thing. And I want to pose this question first, though, which is, do you feel like the main messaging you got around all of the modesty and purity laws had to do with you being too tempting, or around basically shielding the men from temptation? Or do you think it was posed more as, this is what you're supposed to do for God?
I think that there was a lot of apologetics around that you're like a diamond and you want to protect what's beautiful and it's for God. And when I used to teach a lot of laws of modesty, I would compare us to the royal family, how you would never see like Princess Kate wearing jeans. That's so not, you know, appropriate. But it was a lot of apologetics because we all knew that you're a stumbling block for men and that men can't see you undressed. And so there was this constant, like the underlying messaging of being a stumbling block, of men are visual and, you know, they have a responsibility to protect their eyes. I know that there's men who will take their glasses off when they walk around in public so that they're not being tempted by women. But that as good Jews, it's our job to protect the men from themselves. It's another one of those, you can't trust your own self. And so you want to present in a way that is not going to be a stumbling block. So that it was presented as this beautiful, I think it's kvod basmacht pnima, like the honor of a woman is inside. And so we want to, just like a Torah scroll has a covering, it is in an ark because it's our most precious thing. And it only comes out when it's time to read. So is a woman's, you know, physicality in her body. It's hidden and protected until her husband wants her.
And they framed it as like being modest before God, right? Like you're a daughter of the king, God being the king. God shouldn't even see you undressed in your own room, like be very, very modest before God. But only later did I realize like God being the man. Like in this equation, God is just the everyman who shouldn't see you. And I think we knew that it was all kind of an analogy, and we sensed that it was about boys and men. And I think I talked about this the last interview too, so forgive me if you already heard this, but I didn't really understand how modesty related to boys and men until like much later when I was in marriage classes, and my college teacher, the woman who was tasked with teaching me about marriage laws and sex, told me about what happens when a man and a woman come together, and how the man's penis gets hard and goes inside of the woman. Forgive me for being crass. And at the time, I remember being very confused about how does the man's penis know to get hard in that exact moment when it's time to have sex? I didn't get the correlation. And she explained to me that men are visual beings, and when they see something, immodesty, it just causes blood to rush to their penis, and that's why in that moment they know to get hard. But I remember it being such a revelation. I ran home and told my little sister about it. I pulled her aside and I was like, I get it now. I understand why the laws of modesty and why they made us cover up, because boys and men see us and their penises get hard, and all the pieces suddenly made sense. So I think we kind of knew, but it wasn't like blatant until when I connected those dots later.
Right. It seems like all of the pressure is on the woman, or even in these cases, the child, if you're being forced to cover up by 3. And I just spoke about this with Raquel in her interviews. I was like, but that's implying that we're sexualizing 3-year-olds, even if it's just to get them ready or get them used to the purity. It still begs the question of why are we having children cover up if the point is to shield them from boys and from men, which leads us to our next prompt. From your perspective, did the extreme purity rules help keep children and teens safe, or did it make CSA more rampant? And how was CSA handled when someone came forward or was caught?
I think I just want to chime in also in the last question. This will also bring to this question, but I think also when we're talking about like the purity culture, we're thinking a lot about like clothing. But I think I kind of look at it also like a step further, where you can still dress modestly, right? You can still be modest, but even the fact of being a woman, you are you pose a challenge to a man. So there's there's weddings you go to, or any events that you go to, there's always the women and the man are separate, right? There's a mechitza, or which is like a wall.
Tradition.
Between the men and the women. And it's not because the women can't see the men, because when you're a kid, if you're like a girl, you're allowed to peek around and look at the men dancing, and you can see what the men are doing, but the men are not allowed to peek around, or not supposed to peek around and look at what the women are doing. So I think that there's even more of that, or when it comes to singing, right? Like the man is not allowed to hear a woman sing, but a woman can hear a man sing. So I think, it's besides for even the dressing and the clothing, there's so many more and other rules that I know for me, the more like time goes on and actually start thinking about some of those things that I did, or like the separations, I'm like, man, like there's just so much that the women are not allowed to do because we're going to be tempting to the man. It's not just even the clothing. And I think that, going to your next question, I think that I struggle a lot with that, because I hear a lot, well, that can be the reason why the men are, child abuse is more rampant. And I always struggle with that question, or with that saying, yes, that's the reason why. When I think about it, sometimes I'm like, we're giving them an out. We're giving the men the excuse as to why they, it's so to say, it's like, of course they're going to they're going to use you because these are the rules. And I think that it does take away a little bit of accountability when it comes to the man. And I do also think, though, that these rules, it's almost like, and of course, like if we're sexualizing everything and everything's becoming sexual. And we just had which I really love, the podcast that you just had on, the forgot his name. Shalom. I think, hearing him speak too, it's like, of course, right? Like we all have our temptations. We all have, we all have our needs. And I think that just by sexualizing so much, I think it definitely does lead more to child abuse. Although, like I said, I don't really love saying that, but I think it definitely does. And I think the secrecy in the conversations, like not having these conversations, if we were to say, hey, we have to be modest because it's for the men, and you're then discussing with the men like what you shouldn't do or what you can't do, I think that can even help there be less type of abuse. But there's no real conversations. There's no real where I grew up, at least, there's no real talk about these urges. These sex isn't a conversation. You don't talk about it until like, you know, you're engaged and then you find out about it. So people don't even know what to do with their urges. So I think if there's more talk about it too, there can be open conversations and less of abuse.
And just keep going with that thread of modesty. I love that you said that, T, that modesty is so much more than just dress. And a big piece of modesty is not naming body parts, right? Like there's so many every Jewish sect has their version of what they call a vagina and a penis, and like nobody uses those terms. And so there's this like intense sheltering and purity that goes along in the communities without any education on what your body parts are called, what inappropriate touches, what urges are, like T said, so that there's a lot of abuse that happens, or a lot of inappropriate touching that happens, that kids and even young adults are not even aware is wrong, is bad. They don't know what to do with it. I had so many friends. When I moved to Toronto, all of a sudden everybody around me had a story. The brother who played with himself in front of her, the stepfather who abused the kid, so many stories came out. It was like at a sleepover and everybody like shared their deepest, darkest secrets. And I thought, oh my God, like what is happening here? But nobody even had language to explain to us what they were saying. Like we had to sort of like extrapolate what they were telling us, because there's all the secrecy around it. You don't want to talk about it. There's also so much child on child exploration without any understanding of what they're doing, which can create a lot of shame and a lot of lack of understanding of what's going on in you. And then as well, I think T spoke to the fact that there's this self-protection in the community of not reporting, because we don't want to bring bad light onto the Jewish community, which, by the way, we're all in big trouble for speaking out on this, because we're part of the problem of shedding negative light on these Orthodox communities. And so I remember in 7th grade, I came to my dad and I said, my friend is being like abused. And he said, there's like nothing I can do about that. And I was just devastated that I had to then go back to my friend and say, I can't help you. A different friend and parents ended up stepping in, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. So there are good people that do report, and she ended up getting taken out of the home. But there's this huge energy around, like, I'm not going to report it to the authorities. I'm going to get in trouble. We got to protect the perpetrator. So there's definitely an environment of, and then the men's mikvah, we can't, like, so much abuse. There's a lot of unsupervised children running around with adult access.
You know, I'm a mother of 6 boys, right? And a bunch of grandsons too. But, you know, my sons, like, I remember when my youngest was 7 years old and he came home and he was, you know, living with me. And at that point I was exploring it, you know, mostly out of the community already. So he could talk to me, and he was 7 and in school, and he was being taught not to look at women in the street. Right. So I think, as much as there's no question in my mind that the misogyny and the pressure on women is just incredible, but like the way the boys are raised is pretty intense too. Like, you're like 7 years old. He's like a child, and he's being told, right, to be careful, at what he looks at while he walks out on the street. And in regards to child abuse, like, I'll just say there's like a story that I have that is just like unforgivable. And I can't remember if I spoke about it last time. You know, my parents were wealthy, had quite a bit of power in the community. And I had a first cousin my age who was engaged to somebody who was very quickly obvious that he's a sex predator. And I didn't really get what was going on at that point, but I only heard later from my cousins, right? The younger sisters who had tried to help and had reached out to my parents, to other aunts and uncles who were of means and of power, and it was just pushed under the rug, you know, and now they have a large family, and it's just unforgivable to me, you know, the repercussions of that decision, of not to speak up, of not to say anything, of not to report. And there are many children, you know, over the years who have been harmed as a result.
The community has been making strides to educate better, to report more, like there is movement in the community that is happening that I'm very happy to see. It's not nearly enough, but at least the conversations are starting to happen, especially in the mainstream. I can't speak to the Hasidic communities, but in the mainstream Orthodox communities, there's definitely, and I was very involved in bringing that to my communities, a lot more education and awareness, but definitely not when I was growing up.
I do want to say that there was a window a couple of years ago where people were able to report, right, where they kind of opened it up because of statute of limitations for a year. The largest mainstream Orthodox mental health clinic was discouraging its clients from reporting.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
you know what?
Yes. No, I said there's still much more work to do. I'm speaking to the apologetics in the comments. We're going to say, yeah, they are talking about it. Yes, the conversation is starting, but it is nowhere near where it needs to be. That's the only reason I said that.
This is such a big and nuanced topic, and I'm no expert on child sex or any of this, so I can't speak to like, does A cause B or anything like that. I do want to lift up also, and this is like, I want to talk about this like carefully and responsibly, that there is an aspect to this sheltered existence that is protective. I would say in my experience, there was a sense of holiness and purity of how we went about talking, the topics that were allowed at our dinner tables, the kind of people that we were allowed to associate with, the very, very careful protection that my parents had over us, I do think did lead to me having a safer childhood. And it's hard to talk about because I also now work at a nonprofit where I see so many people who are harmed by this exact system. And I'm not denying that it probably causes more harm than good. I think that what I'm grappling with today, now that I'm like 13 years out, is that the world has a problem with sexual predation. Like human beings, we haven't really found a solution yet for navigating this well. And I do think that there are people who really want to get this right. My father, I remember just being very, very protective of us and really wanting to keep us safe and protected. And, you know, in my experience, it worked. And the culture I was raised in was like not being raised around boys in that same way, like only being around girls all the time, like was a protective thing for me in some ways. And so these things are so nuanced. And at the same time, I also know that like not having language for any of these experiences, not being able to talk about it, not having it normalized, that even like knowing that this is a thing that could happen to someone is already so harmful. And I see people all the time who come to me at my job who want to talk about things that they didn't even realize were where they were being harmed or abused, and now finally have language and getting to be witnessed. And these things are so important. And I'm thrilled to hear that there's movement. I talk to my sisters sometimes who tell me also like the community is now talking about it. We're teaching children about consent. We're teaching children about safe touch. I'm happy to hear it. I think there needs to be much, much, much more just education and language for these things and permission to talk about it when it comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree that it's a nuanced discussion, and we could probably spend an entire episode talking about it. I think from my perspective, having not grown up in these communities, but having interviewed, I guess now over 300 people, what I tend to see as patterns are the more sheltered and uneducated we keep these children, the more harm they tend to be in. And that's just, it is a big blanket statement, but it seems like the more isolated, the easier it is to prey on these children. So that's something that I've seen come up quite a bit. Now, again, that's not everybody's experience. I just wanted to get you ladies' opinions on it and what you've seen and experienced firsthand. And before we go away from this topic for the next point, I did want to throw back to you, T. This was a big part of your story, and we spoke at length. We even did 2 episodes because there was just so much to talk about. I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about, in your specific case, what happened when you did report CSA and how that affected you, with whatever much detail you want to provide.
Yeah, I think that's something that I do think makes it very difficult for us to come forth, is that, you know, for me personally, I did report it. And you know, when I reported it in seminary, which is like the 13th grade in the Jewish religion, I reported it, and the principal, who was my second cousin, called my father and let my father know that I reported that, and had my father come and pick me up from school. And he drove me straight to a, you know, Jewish therapist who had a conversation with me. And that was kind of that. And I can say that even through the years upcoming, until even, I mean, I've reached out, some family members have reached out, and then I've responded to them right before I recorded the episode with you. And, I can say that family members and some friends are still very much supporting my dad. And
Who was the
I mean,
perpetrator?
who was
You
the
didn't say that. So if
perpetrator.
anybody who hasn't
And
seen your episode, that yeah.
yeah. They're very much supporting him. And said, I mean, I told you a week and a half ago, my dad even reached out to me and sent me like 2 YouTube videos of singers saying like how one of them was like, when I will pass away. And then it's like basically saying like, you're going to miss all the time spent from when I'll pass away. And the other one is like about an empty seat at the table and just saying how much he misses me and wants to have a conversation. And from when I've sent pretty harsh messages to certain family and friends about 6 to 8 months ago, which I would have a very hard time believing from that they don't, have not informed my father about that till now. The only person who has reached out has been my father. So I think that, there's a huge backing for perpetrators. And I mean, I'm not like the only story. I have many friends and people who are in the community. I mean, there was just about 2 months ago, there was a GoFundMe for a guy who was arrested for abusing a 9-year-old. And there was it's called a Chesed Fund, actually it was, which is the Jewish GoFundMe. And when I looked at it after it was on for about 2 days, he got over $40,000 was contributed to this Chesed Fund. And it's like, there's just an ongoing there. It's so powerful. The Jewish community is very financially powerful, and the backing that certain perpetrators get is extreme. I mean, we all know, I think it's the Weber case in Williamsburg. I'll never forget that. I think I was in 11th grade when she came out for talking about her therapist who had abused her. And I mean, there were protests going on. She was completely, like, I won't speak for her, but I know there was a lot of, again, fundraising that was going towards him. And he just had his retrial recently too. And there was just people that I know from the community, people that I've personally worked with that were backing him and saying, because he was sentenced for a longer sentence, and saying that, it all was made up. It wasn't true. He's a good guy. And thankfully, I believe the sentence stood, but it's don't quote me on that, but it's the backing that predators get. I, being out in the real world for 11 years, I don't see that happening as frequently as I do in the Jewish world. I just don't. So it's very scary. It's scary to know the force and the support that perpetrators have.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Did anyone else have any thoughts before we move on to the next prompt?
Just to what Chavie said, that it's not great in the greater world either. There's so much misogyny and patriarchy and rape culture that I believe comes directly from the Puritans and the Judeo-Christian values of patriarchy. There's a lot of work to do in the world to protect people and children.
Which leads us into our next one, which is, what was the hardest part about being a woman and or wife and mother in your sect? And what was the labor differential you noticed between men and women?
It's hard when you speak in absolutes, like the hardest, but it was all really, really hard. It was all really hard. In the sect that I was raised in, women were responsible for all the things that you would expect women to be responsible for, like giving birth and raising children and cooking and cleaning and getting the kids fed and dressed and all of those things. But in addition to that, women were also the breadwinners. And so we had to like go out and work and take the kids to the babysitter and pick up the kids from the babysitter and cook dinner and wash the laundry and do it all again. While for men, their only responsibility was really to study Torah and to keep themselves pure and holy for God. And it felt deeply unfair. Like I always felt like there was something just off about all of this. Even as a kid, like we had to like be mindful about, like, oh, my brothers are going to come home, make sure there's enough food for them. Don't take the last pizza because the boys haven't eaten yet. Because it's so important that we take care of them and nurture them, because they are serving a very, like, the most important role in the community, which is being good little servants of God, whereas women were just servants of the men who are servants of God. And I internalized that a lot. And I think wherever I could, I was always trying to get some power for myself. Like I was a teacher. And so I really enjoyed the like getting in front of a classroom and inspiring other people, or given opportunities to like speak to the school PTA or whatever it was. Any place where I could take a little bits of power for myself. It felt like stolen glory. And maybe it's why I'm still such an attention whore, but I'm trying to recover.
I can relate very much to that experience. Where I come from, not everybody lived like that, but it was considered kind of the better people would be the scholars, right?
Yeah.
And my parents were wealthy and basically paid a dowry for me to marry a scholar. So I didn't have to work for most of the time. Because my parents were supporting us, and then eventually built us a house with a bunch of apartments, and we used the apartments to support us. But the idea that I love what you said about we were the servants serving the servants of God. Like, absolutely. The idea that the only way for a woman to get to the world to come, which is, a belief and how we were raised, in Orthodoxy, not in all Judaism, but in Orthodoxy, it was like the only way to do that is to support your husband who studies Torah and and sending your son to study Torah. So it was just like, and the way like it was in like my family system and in my marriage, it was like blatantly like that, right? And so it was my job to do kind of all the things in the house at a I would say at a high standard, right? Like I couldn't just throw down a dinner. It had to be like nicely cooked, nicely prepared. My house had to always be clean. My kids had to have matching clothes. And when there were times I didn't have money, I would sit down and sew stuff for them. So everything would be perfect. I would like sew the curtains. Like there was a veneer of, right, my parents built us this like big huge house. So I had to kind of keep up with that. Like we have a big huge house. It has to be beautiful. Everything has to look amazing. So there was a ton. When I think back to how hard I worked, often people will point at the community I've heard it said, and look how beautiful like Shabbos is. Look at that beautiful table. And it was a beautiful table. But guess what? It didn't happen by itself. It happened because I stood for hours and hours and hours, right? Doing all the cooking, doing all the cleaning, polishing the silver, making everything perfect while giving birth to like, I was
10
21
kids.
and I had like 7 kids. Exactly. And it was just like, of course. But again, I was very much a believer. And it was like, that's what I believed like I had to do. And towards the end of my marriage, I went to college, I started to work. So things definitely shifted a little bit as I was trying to like figure out who I was and all that. But for much of it, I really believed it and worked really hard, but with the belief that the hard work in this world is, good preparation for the next world.
Oh, Hava.
Yeah. Your merit comes through your husband's merit. That's how that works, through their learning. The last time I went to the Orthodox Jews are very into like going to what's called a shir, like a class on like a lecture or a class on bettering and words of wisdom. And the last time I went to one of those, it was a Hanukkah party for the women of the community. So it was a female experience. Now, I was an adult educator of outreach to other Jews for 12 years. I was very well equipped to give the Devar Torah, give the piece of wisdom. I was in a room with plenty of teachers. The rabbi's wife, the rabbi of the synagogue's wife was there, very well educated. I was in a powerful room of well-educated women. And the rabbi came to talk to us because the man's words of wisdom are obviously so much more important. And he spent the entire time talking to us about how the work that the women do is so powerful because it allows their husbands to go study Torah, and that's your merit. And I was livid. And I thought, in a room of such educated women, we can't speak to the Torah. Like we know what we're talking about. We can't inspire each other. We can't talk to our worth as our own individual people. So that was the last time I went to something like that. And then it took too many more years till I finally left. But then to speak to the labor of it, Passover is coming up. The holidays come many times a year. I literally like blocked it out. And now it's coming around the corner. And I went, oh my gosh, I have to bring up Passover. The labor that is expected of married women and girls, right? The girls get out of school earlier so they can help their moms clean and prepare. It is a minimum of a month lead up. It's a full spring clean, but so much so that you can't have a crumb of leavened bread in your house. So we're talking like you're cleaning out pockets. you're emptying drawers. Like it's crazy amounts. And then you have to change over your entire kitchen, cover every surface, bring out new dishes, new cutlery, new sets of everything, like transform your whole house for a week. And then you have to cook everything, but you can't use any flour. So your cooking that you normally go to is not available to you. So you have to be creative, and different groups have different extremists. Some peel all their vegetables, and and then you get to the Seder, you get to the pinnacle of like, this is the moment. This is when we tell the story of the Jews leaving Egypt. This is when we pass it down to our children. The women are in the kitchen. The women are the ones serving. The men recline. Women don't have to recline. The men wear white because they're like kings, and the women come and wash their hands. It's literally, I remember thinking, it's a holiday of freedom, and I am a slave. The men are free, and as a woman, I am a slave. And that is true for every holiday. The women are the ones behind the scenes, cooking, prepping. Purim, somebody just mentioned Purim. Oh, not on the talk before. The holiday of Purim, which is our most festive. I loved it because it was my creative outlet. It's like our Jewish Halloween. So I would make costumes for the kids, and you give packages to friends that are themed for your costume, and you spend months leading up preparing. There's a commandment to drink wine and to be merry, but not for women. It's immodest for women to drink wine. So the men are getting drunk. The men are dressing up. Women don't dress up because it's immodest. You don't want to call attention to yourself. So you do all of this work, and then the men are partying, they're dressing up, they're eating, they're regaling each other with stories. And the women are dealing with the kids' overindulgence of sugar, dealing with throw up from the people who can't control themselves, cleaning up the mess, setting the table. Like, the labor that women put in is 100%, and their ability, and I can every holiday, the misogyny and the is, so anybody coming saying women aren't second-class citizens because they're more spiritual, Shalom talked about this, that women are more spiritual, they're closer to God, they don't need the commandments. Yeah, but like, do we not get to have fun? Do we not get to celebrate and enjoy? Sukkot, you have to sit in a hut. Women are exempt because it's a time-bound commandment. I talked about that on my thing. So we're cooking, we're cleaning for 7 days, and we're doing and making it beautiful, like Beatrice said. But if there's no room in the sukkah, you sit in the house. Yeah, so that's my talk to the misogyny and the labor and the lack of access to, and I'll stop there so we have time to talk about other things.
As you're saying this, though, it's making me think, because I know Beatrice and I think Chavie, you brought this up too, and I've been thinking about it too, how so many of these things, when you're in it, you don't actually think so much about it. And I'm like, yeah, the truth is you don't get a lot of time to think about it because you're so busy with all these other responsibilities. Like, I'm thinking about Passover, and I'm like, oh my God, Passover, yeah, even like you said, as a kid, as a teenager, it's like a whole month that's all that's in your head is Passover. Everything's Passover. Like, if usually on Thursday nights we would get pizza, but for the month leading up to Passover, you may not be able to get pizza, or you would have to go out to go eat the pizza because you can't bring it home because you need the house to be kosher for Passover. So it's like there's just so much even within all of these holidays that happen, that besides for, yes, we don't necessarily get to even partake in and enjoy all the fun things about it, but also it's so ever time consuming for the women that it's like, so many of the things when you're in it, you just can't stop and actually think about like, well, maybe this does suck. Like, maybe I don't want to prepare for Passover, or maybe I don't want to prepare for Sabbath, because you're just doing it. There's not that much time to think.
But there's also no ability to say, I don't want to, because Passover's coming and you can't not have a kosher for Passover house. So there is no option to say, I don't feel like doing it this year.
I just need to add, like, I don't know who did Pesach in a month, but it took a lot longer for me to do my house.
I was very lax in my keeping of it.
Well, you were, because you did not mention Q-tips and toothpicks and toothbrushes. Because they were absolutely required tools
to clean your fridge. Yeah,
and like
your fridge
with
toothbrushes.
I remember,
and then
like,
you do bedikas chametz. Yeah.
Yes. But
so my rabbi was so open-minded. He said, and every year I got more and more lenient because I just could not handle, because I made Passover every single year. A lot of people go to their parents or these like all-inclusive resorts for Passover, and I made it every year. So he would say, dirt is not chametz, is the thing that any leavened bread, any crumbs that have to do with flour or whatever. So dirt is not chametz, and poison isn't chametz. So I would go around with my Windex and literally spray every surface. I'm like, now it's poison. Now I'm good. That was.
That's funny.
So that, like, what Chavie was saying about taking power where you could, I was like, I am not going to be more religious than God. So if God said, if my rabbi said that God is okay with this version, every year I would get more and more lax because it's so taxing.
Yeah, I sometimes joke when people are like, "Do you not miss aspects of it?" And I do. Like, I do miss Pesach, Passover. Like, I do miss the like that feeling of like sitting together around a table that we worked so hard to prepare for, in a shiny, clean house, and the food smells so good, and the songs are familiar, and the rituals of coming back every year and doing the same, like eating the same foods and singing the same songs and smelling the same smells. Like, I miss it, but I want to have it again as a child. Like, I don't want to have it again as the mother of the family. I like, no thanks. I want to just be a kid experiencing that again, because it does have a magic. And I think I like to, like, I don't know, it feels important to me to bring some kind of like balance to this, maybe to address the haters that are going to come in the comments and be like, but it's actually so beautiful. And it is. And there's aspects of it. Human beings do really thrive on like rituals and like a groundedness in history, and like a thing where like we're doing these things that our ancestors did. There's something very meaningful to it. I think that the problem with fundamentalism across all faiths is where we kind of turn it into this rigid, rule-based, like, and specifically where it impacts, women and vulnerable populations. Like, that's when it gets so convoluted and messy, to the point where like I can't even enjoy offering it to myself now in some other version. Like, it's all so polluted and ugly because of how the toxic rules and the control of women really impacted me.
I just feel like I need to say this. So I currently work in a very liberal branch of Judaism. That's my job, my full-time job. So we'll be having a Seder that I am kind of working at. And it's just so interesting to me, the way like they celebrate their holidays, like it's so differently. It really is like an opt-in choice. Like, I do so many different things in my life, and I also choose to participate in my Judaism in this way. And I didn't think it would be so refreshing for me to be in that environment. And it really is. It just like is like a completely different way of kind of connecting with these rituals. So I will say there feels like there may be a way to do this right, but without all the misogyny and
I think Beatrice right is she said opt in. And so I did Passover with my kids last year. We had the most fun. We started at 6:30. You got to start at sundown. So Seder always starts at like so late, 9:30, 10 o'clock. We started early. We had music. We had all the props. We had such a ball. And it was on our terms. We got to choose how we wanted to celebrate it. And that's the issue I think that all of us have and are speaking to. The lack of choice in this, or the illusion of choice, because people are going to come at us and say, you have free will. Sure, I'm not going to, can I choose God and truth or burn for whatever version of hell your sect believes in? That's not a choice. The illusion of choice is not real choice. And I think being able to opt in, it can be really beautiful. Because like Chavie said, rituals are beautiful. The coming back every, like there's so much beauty in it, and it gets destroyed by not having a choice. And T, sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, I'm agreeing. I love that. No, I love that, because I think that's really what it is that, like when you're in it, right? When you're in the religion, you don't realize that you have that choice, because, and like you said, it's like an illusion because of whatever is, whether it be fear, right? Or that you're going to burn in hell if you don't keep it. So I think that when you're in it, and at least from my experience, when I was in it, you don't feel like you have that choice. But I think that is what's beautiful, is that to know that, maybe you can celebrate Passover or do the rituals of Passover without all of these strict rules. And what is that salad dressing, right? If you want to, and you pick and what you want to, what you don't want to. And I think that can be beautiful for sure.
But I also want to talk about like choice. So there is definitely the fear, right, of God that we have, but I think there are real repercussions of that we pay a price for leaving. And I don't know if we'll get to that in this conversation, but it's very real, and I think it's important for people to know kind of how great life can be afterwards, but also the real price we pay. And it's not, sometimes those threats are not empty threats. They can be very real.
And I think all of you perfectly illustrated the labor differential between men and women. I want to just jump back to the first part of the question just to see if there's anything that we missed, what is the most, maybe not most for Chavie, what is something that comes to your mind being very difficult as a woman in these high control spaces? And maybe it's emotional or spiritual, less than the physical side that we've already covered, in a way that you feel like it was more difficult, or there were more pressures on you or more expectations, whether that's spiritual or emotional. I know that many of you talked about just the difficulty of even giving birth and not being able to be touched by your husband because of the purity laws. I feel like that's definitely an emotional harm that can be caused. So I just wanted to open that space before we move on.
No, I went first last time. You go first.
Okay, I'll go first. So you brought up pregnancy and giving birth, and I want to take that line. I very much felt that my body belonged to God, my husband, my children, and then me, in that order. And I think all of us talked a lot of the family purity laws in our own podcasts, and about the injury of like post-birth, you can't touch your husband, you can't get a hug, you can't get physical, emotional support. A story that I have around that just so illustrates how incredibly harmful this can be. So when I was 22, I was pregnant with my third child, and it happened on Simchat Torah, which is a holiday that we celebrate the Torah, and women just watch the men dance and party as per usual. And I woke up, it was a 2-day holiday. So I woke up and it's like no electricity, no getting into the car, no all of that kind of stuff. I woke up Saturday morning. I had two toddlers, and I didn't feel the baby moving. And I did the like drink the water and the juice and make sure and check. And then I realized like we have a real problem. And now I have to get a hold of my husband who's at synagogue. And you can't pick up the phone and you can't call, right? You're in a moment of crisis and panic, and you cannot call your significant other for support. So I had to get my little boy's dress, I had to get myself dressed, and I had to get dressed for synagogue, right? Because I have to go into synagogue. Luckily, I lived across the street, went across the street, and I have to find my husband. I can't go into the men's section because women are not allowed in the men's section. So now I have to wait for somebody to come out, pull them over, make them uncomfortable that a woman, I'm talking to a man. Can you go find my husband? Get my husband, right? Like, so even before I can even figure out how to handle this, the amount of hoops that I had to jump through because of the religious laws was just so much to deal with. And then my husband comes out, and I said, I'm not feeling movement. And so we were supposed to go to our friends for the Shabbat meal. So we took our boys over, dropped them off. We said, we're going to go to the hospital. We'll check back in. And so you're allowed to, if there's any potential loss of life or danger, or with a kid, even if it's just like a broken arm injury, you can actually get into a car and go to the hospital. The rabbis in their wisdom, and I said this with awe, and now I say it in quotation marks, in order for people to actually get medical care in these situations, knowing how pious people are and how seriously they take the rules. Well, am I really in danger? Am I not really in danger? They made a law that you can drive to the hospital and you can also drive home so that you don't get stuck there. So people would actually take this seriously. So we get in the car, we drive to the hospital, and we find out that there's no heartbeat. And in that moment, and you talked about the emotional piece of it, in that moment, I thought, oh my gosh, God must love me, because God only gives his hardest challenges to the people that he trusts the most. And that was the first time that I felt loved by God. And that's so fucked up, with all due respect. And I felt no grief, because like, if everything happens for a reason from God, then this must be from God. So it must be fine. And so then the doctor said to me, you have a couple options. We can induce you right now. I was 34 weeks pregnant, so this was going to be a full delivery.
Oh my gosh.
You can get induced right now. You can go home and come back. And you have up to 2 weeks to come back, which is actually mind-boggling. But so now I'm facing the most awful, moral, ethical, God decision, right? Like Jewish law decision, because I'm allowed to go home, right? The rabbi said I'm allowed to go home, but I'm no longer in danger. So if I go home, I can't come back until the holiday is over. Now it's Saturday morning, holiday's not over till Sunday night, which means I can't come back to the hospital till Monday morning. So I can go home and walk around with that situation. I'm trying to be respectful and trigger warning-y, but walk around like that for 2 days before I can come back, because I'm not allowed to come back according to Jewish law until the holiday's over. Or I can stay in and deliver the baby right then. The problem was I had toddlers at home. I had a 2- and 3-year-old who knew I was pregnant, didn't know where their parents were. We can't call our friends to tell them where we are. We can't communicate with my kids and tell them what's going on. So my choices were, my husband goes home and be's with the kids. Because again, it means we're leaving our kids with our friends for 2 days with no information. So my husband could go home and take care of the kids. And then I'm by myself. We can just assume that they'll figure out to take care of them and he stays with me and I get support, or I prioritize my children and I go home and I be with them and then I go back in on Monday. To have to put somebody in that kind of position is abuse. And God put me in that position. God's laws, the Torah, put me in that position. So I chose to prioritize being a mom, and I went home and I was with my kids and went back Monday. The flip side of that is the way the community showed up for us was something that I hope everybody gets an opportunity to experience in their life. Because when we talk about how hard it is to leave, losing this kind of community is devastating. The rabbi saw our car come back. He came in and checked in with my husband. What's going on? He told him what was going on. They immediately sent over one of my good friends to check in on me. She said, we're here for you. Happens to be her mom. They called her the dead baby nurse because she dealt with like miscarriage and loss. And so she was well equipped to tell me this is what's going to happen, this is what you need. And she said, the community is here for you. You can speak to people or not. I can be your liaison, whatever you need, however you need. And the community showed up. The hospital were like, are you celebrities? Like, what is going on here? Like the food and the care and taking care of the medical decisions and all of the kind of stuff around that was just so incredibly beautiful. And for 3 weeks, they took care of my kids. They grocery shopped for us. They brought us dinner. It was so beautiful to be held like that. So I just want to give the two sides of like the awful moral injury, but then at the same time, being carried like that by a community is so seductive. And leaving that kind of care is just heartbreaking and having to rebuild that. So I don't know if that answered your question.
Wow. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. And I'm just imagining afterwards, or at least giving birth, knowing that this child had passed, you also had to go through that alone, right? Because your husband wouldn't have been allowed to touch you or hold you
Correct.
during this.
Correct.
Oh, that's another layer.
They also give the baby
terrifying.
a circumcision, which was such an
They
awful thing to think
did.
about. I found all that out in the moment. So the baby got a name and a circumcision and got a burial in an unmarked grave where the parents aren't supposed to go to. It's just the laws around it are aggressive.
Why unmarked grave?
Until a baby is a month old, it is considered a fetus. And so it doesn't get the same status of human burial and mourning laws and all the rest of it.
What?
So, yeah. So you want to talk about abortion laws and when life starts. Yeah.
What?
So because it reached term, it was considered a whole body. So it still got a circumcision and a name, or he did, but because he was not a month old, it's a separate part of the cemetery that's for infants. And they discourage parents from going to visit.
Do you feel like that situation, you mentioned you didn't mourn because you felt like it was all part of God's plan. Do you feel like looking back that did you a disservice, some sort of spiritual bypassing just to try and
100%.
get through this? Yeah. Have you been able to actually mourn the passing of your child?
So when I was getting divorced and leaving the community and going through all my files, I was going through my medical files and I found a release form and I fell apart, as you should. And I was able to go back and grieve and go through the process. But the level of spiritual bypassing where I had this list of like, I'm okay because God loves me and wants me to do this. There's this idea of reincarnation. I think T talked about that in your podcast. This idea that souls come back to finish their roles. And so this idea of sometimes a baby just needs to come through a Jewish mom and then they've completed their mission. So I walked around, I still believe this, but like as a mom, all you want to do is get your kids to like be okay. And I'm like, can't fuck this one up. Like this one's good to go. Now I say it tongue in cheek, but then I deeply believed it. I'm like, I can't mess up this kid. This one I brought to their completed goal. And everything happens for a reason. So I can't judge God. Somebody asked me actually, because as an educator, this woman dealt with new mothers and all the mental health that goes around that. She asked me if I would lead a grief group. And I said, I can't, because I don't feel grief. So I can't help other people grieve because I need to give them, like, if they believe what I believe, I can walk them through it. But if they don't believe that, there's a heaven and that God has a purpose and all the rest of the stuff, then I don't know how to help people grieve because I didn't grieve. But I've since been able to do that. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow, there's something similar in Mormonism, and I guess I didn't mention this yet, so we're like an hour and a half in. If you're finding the channel for the first time, I grew up mainstream Mormon, and there was a very similar sentiment of if you lose a child in any stage of pregnancy or afterward, it's the same thing. Well, you brought the child down, that's all they needed. They're going straight to the celestial kingdom, which is the highest level of heaven. And if you follow all of your covenants and keep all of the rules, then maybe you'll be worthy enough one day to raise that child in celestial heaven. So then on one hand, it's like, wow, how beautiful. I'll get to raise my child one day that I lost. On the other hand, if you leave the church, they have it in their mind that I won't get that chance, because what if the church is true and I don't make it to the highest level of heaven? That child's never going to have their mother. And that's also a really terrifying thing.
That's awful. That's awful. I'm sorry.
I just also want to respond to what Raquel just shared. Just first of all, I'm so sorry you experienced that. That's just, it's so unbearably painful and sad. And I had similar experiences of like the restrictions of Shabbos or a holiday leading me to be faced with like horrible choices in terms of my children's like care and medical care and things like that. And that's just, it's devastating, and it's too much to put on a person. We were so young too. We were so young, trying to like bring these like tiny beings into existence. Something you shared about the community showing up for you, which I'm so glad you had that, and thank goodness for that. I also just want to name for people listening that, like, while that's true in some cases that the community shows up beautifully for people, first of all, I think that's true mostly around childbirth stuff. For some reason, they really like, that's your purpose, so we're really going to take care of you if you're bringing life into the world. But other than that, I didn't experience very much community support, and I needed it a lot in so many different parts of my life. And more even like, and I still like I had a strong support system, but there's the community prioritizes people who they deem good enough or inside or from the right kind of family or mentally, whatever it is. And there's just so many people who I encounter now in my work supporting people who are leaving the Hasidic community who didn't have that inside and don't have it outside. And I just want to make sure that they also feel seen in this, that it's one of those perks that exists for some people some of the time, but even that is not universal for everybody who's in the Hasidic community, that they'll get that warm, nourishing community support, because it's still very ableist and very like about privilege and who's the right kind of family and who deserves the kind of support and who doesn't. And there's a lot of work still to be done.
I'm so happy you said that, because I very much appreciated my privilege in that moment. We were the young outreach couple. We were doing God's work. We were the popular ones. And one of the reasons I stayed in Jewish outreach for as long as I did is because I watched the people's money and status give them access to the community or not give them access to the community. And I'm glad you brought that up, because a caveat, when I did a different podcast actually with Shalom, if anybody wants to go see that, I said I realized my privilege in that moment. Not everybody has access to that kind of community. So thank you so much for saying that. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to something that I think is a big topic for a lot of people, and we wanted to bring this up. If you went through the matchmaking process, did you genuinely feel happy or excited about the person you were matched with? And how long after meeting him were you married?
For me, my experience was, so I left the community, I don't know, 2014. I'm 34 now. I guess I was 24. No, like 23, 22, which is considered old. I had 100 girls in my grade. I would say 80%, if not more, were married. But, I would say that once for the matchmaking, I had a little bit of a different experience also because of family dynamics. But I had zero control. And this is, I think, speaks true to most people with matchmaking. I had zero control or say really in the initial matchmaking process. So for me, the initial process and for many, the initial process is your parents are speaking to a matchmaker, and the matchmaker sending out the resume, right? I mean, I still have my resume. I look at it and I laugh. Talking about hair, the photo for my resume was, my hair was tired, because that's, you don't really walk around with your curly hair. That's not something you're proud of. So I still have that photo, but the matchmaker sends out the resumes to the parents, and then the parents kind of go through, I mean, the resumes mine had, photo, height, weight, education, parents' education, grandparents' education, siblings, and then camps that we went to, because camp was a big thing, and then references. So nothing about personalities or anything like that. And then my parents would find out about the men through the references. They would call references and find out more information. Me personally, I've dated less than 5 guys in the 4 or 5 years that I was in that process. And I think that was, my parents said no to everyone. And I think a big part of that had to do with more of the abuse and the control. But I essentially had no real say in it. And I know a lot of my friends at that time also really didn't have much of a say in it until you go out with the guy. Once you go out with the guy, at least, and I know it's very different and different levels of strictness. Mine was, I would say, a little bit less strict. When you go out with the guy, you can then go back and tell your parents yes or no, and your parents would go and speak to the matchmaker. And like my siblings went out usually about 6 or 7 times. And then, they would tell the matchmakers yes or no. And then if they both are saying yes, you continue on with the dating. The dating is like, you start off going to hotel lobby. And then because we were a little bit more chilled, we would also then go to a restaurant, or, you may go for like a walk out somewhere, but you're not like going to like, I don't know, a concert or anything like that. And then once you say yes, you go out. Once the man feels like he's ready, for us at least, once like my brothers felt like they were ready to get married, they would tell the matchmaker would tell the woman's mother, and then they knew a proposal was coming. So like when the proposal's happening. Again, for me in particular, it was very hard because I didn't feel like I had a say. I didn't feel safe with my parents to let them know yes or no. My parents didn't hear me either way, even if I did. But it was very limited. I know there was one guy who I went out with that I really wanted to go on a second date. And my parents said no, he was a diabetic. My parents told the matchmaker no, and it was like I had to go around my parents' back to speak to his cousin, a woman who I knew, or was the aunt. But I would have to speak to a family member, be like, hey, I actually did want to, go out, but then now I'm looking as like, what am I doing that I'm stepping above my parents? So it's like it's just so much out of control, like out of the woman's control, that it makes it really, really difficult. I like to say also, if you're not like, it's like you got to be in like an edel madel, like you got to be the look good, just like the perfect sweet like person. And if there's any blemish or anything like that, then my parents, then start looking at blemishes for the man. So it's just, there's so much judgment. There's so much lack of control, let alone even sexuality wise. There's like, being gay is like not even a thing, that it's not even like, ooh, maybe they don't even want to date a man. Like that's like, of course, not even a thing. It's a very difficult process. And I think for people, because I've had many people reach out that are in that stage. And I think the biggest thing that I want to say is that it's a very, very much a struggle. And I know that for me, what I would say to my younger self is, before being worried about who I'm going to marry, I first should have, and like my younger self, taking care of myself and figure it out. Who am I? What do I want? Do I want to get married? Do I want to be religious? And really take a step back instead of just jumping into like, I got to do what I got to do and get married by a certain age, or else I'm looks bad or blemish and things like that. So I know I kind of like all around, just it's so much when it comes to like the dating and the nuances and just the lack of control for that process and judgment.
Yeah, wow. I just I had a very, similar and yet totally different experience. Like in my community, we didn't even get to go out on several dates. It was like 1 or 2 meetings at the dining room table, like supervised with the parents in the next room. And then very quickly, it was just like, okay, is it a yes or is it a no? I've talked about this in my last interview, but, my father was like, well, do you like him? Do you love him? And I said, no. And he was like, do you like him? And I said, no. And he said, do you think you could grow to like him? And I was like, I guess he's a very good Torah scholar. And that was enough, enough of a reason for me to marry him. And what I'm sitting with, hearing like you speak about this, T, and just looking back on my own experiences, the harm that this causes, like me just being an 18-year-old trying to do right by my parents, trying to do right by my community, marrying the person they tell me to marry. And now I look at, like, I have 3 children by this man who I didn't want to marry, 3 children who are, wonderful, beautiful people who this is their father, I am their mother. And I think I've spent so much time in the years after my divorce and leaving the community trying to create a world of possibility for my children, a life that's better than the one that I was raised in, break the generational cycles, all the fun cliches that people say. And the reality is you can't. Like, my children are a part of this man and he is a part of them. And that the fact that there was no, choice for any of us in this, and this is just our reality, and we are left to grapple with the trauma of this for the rest of our lives. It's something that's, I think I want to just lift how, like, it's not just about how awful it was for me as an 18-year-old marrying a man I didn't want to marry. And to answer your question, it was, I married him 6 months after our engagement, but we weren't allowed to talk during those 6 months. So it was as if I just met him, got engaged, got married, and then very quickly had children without the opportunity to even consider birth control or other choices. Which meant that, at 25 years old, I was divorced with a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old who I then had to figure out how to parent, how to teach values that matter to me, and also take into consideration this whole other person that continued to be kind of a stranger to me because we never really connected or meshed. We were just 2 strangers who were forced to do this thing together. The harm runs so deep and the damage is forever, and everybody deserves better. And one more thing I was going to say is that there's an Instagram account from someone who was also raised in the Hasidic community, who is now like a sex counselor, or I don't know what title. Yeah, I also don't want to call attention to the person's account because I don't know if she's trying to get outside audience. So I'm not going to say the name of the account, but I follow this account. She does ask me anythings on her Instagram story where people who are in the community can ask her anonymously questions about sex and marriage and children, and sex and marriage, actually, not about children. And the pain that exists for these people, the harm that is done to all of these people who are actively right now considering marriage and thinking about themselves and their sexuality and their interests and their hopes and dreams for themselves. And these are already people who are on the margins because they're on Instagram. So they're not the most holy and pure. And so these are the people who have a little bit of access, and they're still so limited in self-knowledge and what they deserve. And they're going into these huge life choices. They're, the repercussions are generations deep, and everybody deserves better. Everybody just deserves more choice and more knowledge and more information and education. Sorry, that was my little rant, but I'm passionate about this stuff.
Thank you.
No, that was great. Beatrice, you were also married at 18.
Yeah, I got married at 18. A little different, but very, very similar. We met 3 times around the dining room table. He barely spoke English. So I spoke in Yiddish, which I was raised speaking Yiddish, but I hadn't spoken it as a conversational language for a while. Then he went back to Israel for 5 months. And my mother, I found out afterwards, basically we had a phone call every 2 weeks for 10 minutes. I have no idea what we spoke about because probably the shopping I did to get ready for the wedding, I imagine. I will say outwardly, I felt like I succeeded. Right? I did what I was supposed to do, right? And I had a time when I was rebellious when I was 16. And now it's a joke, the things I was doing. But from my parents' perspective, it was terrible. I went to watch a movie once. I wore knee socks. They sent me away to seminary.
I also rebelled like that.
Yeah, right? But I came back with very sincere promises, to be perfect, right? So then when these matches started coming in, and because my parents, were of stature and had money, we were there was no resumes. That did not happen in my world. I don't know if it happens in my children's world right now, but it definitely wasn't when I was when my older children were getting married. That did not exist. We didn't have resumes. It was word of mouth. It was a relative. It was a friend. It was not it was, I I don't know what happens right now, but we didn't have resumes. It was people who knew people. So, you know, we got a lot of phone calls, and like felt like I got the top of the top. Like now it's like a joke. My parents spent so much money to get this person. And like I recognize now, I was like a cog in the system, right? To like keep this going. Like I was literally married off for a ton of money to this man to serve him so that he can continue his dream of being a scholar. But if you had asked me then, it felt good. It felt like I did it. I did what I was supposed to do. Did I even know what it would have meant to fall in love at that point? I don't think I could have known what that meant. And in regards to my children, so it was very much, my oldest got married while I was still married and in the community. And she was 17 when she got engaged. And that's a lot for me to hold, how complicit I was. That's all I knew. That's what I did. Again, felt like a huge accomplishment, right? So now my children have fallen several rungs in stature in the community, right? Because back then, while we were still married, he was a scholar, we had status, we had the family lineage, all the things. Now with the divorced mother, divorced parents, so my children are getting married a little bit older, and I know for them it must feel very painful, right? Because getting married young, getting early is a big thing, but I don't know, they have a few years of breathing space.
I relate to a lot of what Beatrice was saying, but so I probably come from the most open-minded, most relaxed version of the dating process. But the thing that I want to speak to is that our entire goal, we were raised to be wives and mothers. That is the goal. That is the ultimate. The laws revolve around, like when the laws around women are around the fact that we're going to be mothers. I sat in my daughter's first grade orientation, and the principal said, your daughter's embarking on this great journey of school, and our goal is to create beautiful wives and mothers to build more Jewish homes. And I looked at my friend and I said, and that's it? The end? So when the purpose is to be a wife, then even in the community where I came from, where there is a lot more autonomy and a lot more choice, I mean, to what T said, the way that the system works is there are resumes, and the boy gets to say yes first. If the boy says yes, then the girl gets the recommendation. So there is definitely centering on the men's choice more than the women, but the woman gets to say yes or no at that point. You can date, as many people as you need to, as long as you need to, anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months. I dated for 5 weeks, just like a whole long time. And but you go into it with, like Beatrice said, like my goal is to be a wife. So getting somebody wanting to marry me is like the highest compliment. So there isn't a huge amount of, do I want this specific person? Do I want this? But like, is this the right person to do this with? And when they propose to you, it's just like accomplishment. Like I did it, I succeeded. Especially me, I was the rebellious girl. I had the curly hair. I had the, aura around me that didn't conform. And so when they did the where everybody's going to be in 10 years, they said I was going to be 27 and a veterinarian, unmarried, which was like the biggest insult that you could give anybody. And then I was the first one in my grade to get married. So this was this huge sense of accomplishment. Like I did it. Like, look, all of you. And I married somebody worthy, a scholar who we ended up going into Jewish outreach. Like literally every teacher in my school came to my wedding. Every classmate, everybody came because they were so she did it, she made it. So there's this deep sense of accomplishment. And even when there is choice, the thing that you're choosing is not a choice. It wasn't, do I want to get married or not? It's, do I want to marry this specific person or that person? Because of course I'm going to get married. That's not even an option. And again, the sexuality, you don't even consider that. Like before you even get to, do I want to marry this person or not? None of that is up for, am I interested or not? So that's what I'd say.
Yeah.
All of this feels extremely transactional versus romance, which I can understand. There can be some pros and cons to all of that. But on the flip side, I wanted to ask you, since leaving all of you, what was it like when you actually had a romantic connection with someone, did you realize in that moment that that's what you were missing, or that's what it felt like, or that's what you could have had? Just all of those complicated feelings around actually falling in love or having a crush or something when you're allowing yourself to.
I would love to just start us off with that because I'm bursting to respond to what Raquel just shared. Gosh, so I knew what it was like to be in love before because I was a lesbian until I was 30 years old. I identified as a lesbian and I was attracted to women, to girls when I was in school. And so I was definitely like very self-aware around what love and attraction would feel like. And then married a man I didn't want to marry, but I didn't understand the correlation between those experiences I was having with girls and what was expected or supposed to happen in a marriage. They were like these two separate things for me. Marriage was a godly, responsible thing, and the lust or sluttiness I had, that was unrelated to what was supposed to happen in a marriage. So later, after I got divorced and left the community, and fast forward a bunch of years, I was in a relationship with a person for 8 years that ended this last August, and I'm now in a process of like a new layer of figuring out, wow, who was I and who am I becoming, and how many layers of like unlearning am I still doing around stuff that are residual from like the earliest days. And I think that having been raised in a culture where like marriage is the ultimate success and who you marry makes it seem, really makes that clear and establishes you as like whether you're worthy or not. I think I still had that sense of like I wouldn't consider myself successful outside of the Hasidic community until I got into a stable relationship and had that like living together, raising the children together, like doing that thing that still felt like such an important aspect of whatever success means. And I'm now deconstructing some of that and realizing like, I think that when I left the Hasidic community, I thought outside of the Hasidic community was normal life and everything that's better. And I think I'm realizing now that everything's a cult. I know that makes your podcast a little less special, but I feel like it's like I'm constantly deconstructing. Like I'll find myself in this new like layer of something, and I'm like, oh wow, like the relationship structures and what's considered normal, it's still so prescribed for people. And there's so much and I'm not saying like that it was a bad relationship. It was actually a wonderful relationship, and I'm glad I had this last relationship that I had too. And also, I want to just get off of the escalator of like, you do this thing and then the next thing, and then you buy the house and then you get the picket fence and then you have the grandkids. Like, that's not good enough for me. I feel like every decade or so, I reinvent myself completely. And, this now we're in the stage of like deconstructing the story about what relationships should be. And I'm having a great time. So I invite people to deconstruct. We're all in cults. We can constantly deconstruct.
I'm gonna jump in because I relate to so much that you're saying. Shalice's like relationships. I'm like, when I joke that I responsibly blew up my life, I literally walked away from everything, my marriage, religion, all of it. And the beauty of that was, for the first time, everything was up for grabs to deconstruct. And one of the big things that I was embarked on was deconstructing the construct of marriage and where that comes from and the history of it and why it's so patriarchal. It's tied to property laws and inheritance, which is so mind-boggling. And the rise of divorce, everybody likes to claim that the instant gratification generation, it's like, no, women are allowed to have bank accounts and they can have jobs and they can have autonomy, so they don't need men anymore. And all of a sudden 70% of divorces are being instigated by women because they're like, I don't think this isn't working for me. And so much of the deconstruction around, like you said, relationship structure, what that even looks like. And then the other piece is when you, like we know with emotions, if you try to shut down, anger or sadness, all of your emotions come offline. Like you can't pick and choose which emotions you're going to shut down. And that's very true for sexuality. And so when you enter these marriages where the goal is to be married, and you have all of these structures around what sex can and should look like, and it's so constrained and it's so contained, there's no time or room to even explore what sexuality is or means or looks like. And when you leave, I've also been embarking on this self-discovery of my sexuality. What does that even mean? What does that look like? What do I like? What am I interested? Sexuality is such a spectrum. I like that you said you identified as a lesbian and now you're like, I don't know. Because one of the harms of this is that we do not have access to ourselves at all. And to finally have access to yourself, depending on how old you are and how long you were in a marriage. I was married for 16 years. From 18, I also got married at 18. So I never had like a normal development of exploration. Being able to do that now has been such a gift, but it also comes with such a layer of trauma and hyper independence, and nobody's ever going to have control over me again, and nobody's ever going to have claim over me again. And so it makes it so much more complicated to even know what love is and what lust feels like, and what, Shalise, we talked about what the first time I had horny sex, because the week leading up to your period is like, that's when you're horniest and you're not even allowed to be with your husband. Like, what is that? And I went, oh, like this is what they're talking about. Even just such little things like that are so mind-blowing to all of us who are out here trying to figure it all out. So Chavie, I so relate to everything you said.
Yes, Beatrice, how about you?
Yeah, this is a good question. And I'm glad you brought up the topic of trauma. It's for the first time I'm living on my own. I'm in California now for the last 7 months on my own for literally the very first time in my life. And of course that comes with, a lot of pain with, my children being back on the East Coast, who I'll be going to visit very soon. And I would have imagined myself really wanting to be in a relationship, like right away, right? Like, this is my time. It's me.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. I date a little bit here and there, but like I'm enjoying the time on my own. And I think back to how hectic, for lack of a better word, my life was for decades, right? Where like a peaceful evening at home, like I crochet, I watercolor, just it's just such a gift. And it used to be a very important, I was not in a long-term, I have not been in a long-term relationship since I left, but it used to be a very important goal of mine. And there is some acceptance for me along my healing journey of like, it was really bad for a really, really long time. And I don't know what that means for my future. And that's fine. Like I can find happiness. It used to be very much like in the community, it always felt like there was something I needed to work on, something I needed to improve, something I needed to be better, right? That was kind of the spiritual path. And I kind of carried a lot of that with me after I left as well. And it took me a while to kind of connect the two and realize, wow, this I need to find meaning. I need to find purpose. I need to find no, it's just fine. I can just I have this wonderful job. People are lovely. And I come home. It's just I'm enjoying that aspect of my life as well. And we'll see. I don't know, how all I will walk through this journey, but I don't feel that same intensity or pressure at all at this point.
Yes. Can I just say, I love all of those answers. And it just shows how far you all have come in your deconstruction and your healing process and finding yourself for you to be like, I take that question, Uno reverse, joke's on you. I don't want a man. I think it's amazing, truly, for you guys to be like, maybe it works for me in a time. Maybe I just want to take time for myself right now. I don't even want a guy in the picture. And all of that is so awesome and beautiful. And I'm so glad that you truly answered it exactly how you feel in this moment and didn't try to make an answer work for me. And it's probably my Mormon programming showing too. I'm like, don't you want the fairy tale? I haven't deconstructed.
I would love to hear from T, because from your episode, it sounds like you're in a beautiful, loving relationship. So
yes.
Yeah. So I did, when I left the religion for about 7 years, I've always been a person I don't really need, or I like to say I don't really need anyone. I don't need to be in a relationship. When I was in the religion, I felt like I needed that in order to complete who I was as a person. But when I left, I was like, I'm not doing this bullshit. And I really spent 7 years. I mean, I didn't date. I would have a date here or there, went twice, one of them being an Orthodox person that my friend tried setting me up. It was like, oh, maybe he'll make you back Orthodox and just pretend to be Orthodox. But you know how that goes. But other than that, really, I mean, I just was like, if it's going to happen for me, it's going to happen for me, but it has to be the right person, because else it's just not worth it. And I've been really, really lucky. Yeah. In 2019, met my now current wife, and in a very, very healthy, happy relationship. We both, really pursue our own independence while also supporting each other and doing things together too. I mean, she laughs because I'm the type of person, like, I really, at this point in my life, and it's been like this, I don't do anything by the books. I don't care to. I'm like over that, done that. So like I don't want kids, probably, never want kids, have like, run my own business, do my own things. I'm very not according to what like people say to do, how to do, dress what I want to wear, wear what I want to wear. I don't put on a show for anyone. And I would say that, really for me, I've realized that you could have that partnership that does add a lot of value and happiness, while also being yourself. Now, let me tell you though, my one piece of advice is though, be in couples therapy, because that's been one condition in our relationship. We are in couples therapy, even if it's once a month. So when
it's like maintenance. We should all be in like maintenance 100%, therapy.
100%. But you can be in, and definitely, and I feel very, very fortunate to be in a very healthy and happy relationship.
That's really amazing. Special. Everyone just being so true to themselves and figuring out what works and what doesn't. It's all part of the deconstruction process. And I want you guys to be able to have the opportunity to speak to those who are maybe considering leaving their group, whether it's this religion or not. It could be something totally different, and talk about some of the challenges that you face, losing community, losing family overnight in some cases, and some of the very real world things that you face once you leave that very isolated, insular community.
I can jump in. I mean, I can speak to when I left the community, and so like I said, I went into eating disorder treatment when I left the community, and I was about 22 at that time. And I really left. I left living in I left my parents' home. I left living in my parents' home in Muncie and went to Pennsylvania in treatment, and then completely moved out of Muncie. Went from I was started a volunteer organization. We were servicing 500 plus families. I mean, really was pretty well known within the community, very respected, other than I wasn't married. And, came from like a wealthy family, and just always had a pretty good front. And I know that when I left and people heard that I went into eating disorder treatment, it was almost right after two of my very, very good friends passed away that I spent a lot of time with. Both of them had cancer. And I know it was like, that I had a nervous breakdown. So I think for me, the biggest thing was that a lot of my friends and family, they started treating me like a nebuch case, like a pitiful case, because I had a nervous breakdown, instead of really hearing me and understanding what was going on. And I know that in and of itself was kind of like a crush to who I am and who I was, as a person, where I had this like name and I felt very secure because of everything that I did. But, now hearing like from that standpoint, it became like the pitiful one. That was very hard. And I would say throughout the first few years, really, I back and forth communication with my parents, but even with friends, I became like the hush hush and the secret, where there was just, everyone was talking about me behind my back. There was all different stories and rumors. And basically, I mean, for me, I had to take a complete step away. I was like, I got to just not speak to anyone and totally not be involved, because it's too harmful and hurtful, the stories that people were saying. And even just knowing like what I would say when I was in the community about people that had left the community. So it was a very, very difficult few years. Even when I left in Pennsylvania, I moved to Bala-Cynwyd, which is an Orthodox community there. And I only spent a period of time there because the support I was getting was very conditional. It was like, if I would still be religious, then they would still, they helped me with my rent after I left rent free. But as soon as I became no longer religious, they wouldn't help me with the rent. So, or I would show any signs of that, they stopped that. And then it was like, they would only help me with groceries. And it was just, everything felt extremely conditional, which made it very, very, very difficult. It was, 5 to 7 years of really just having to stand on my own 2 feet, having to figure out, jobs, no more support system, being out in the real world, and eating eating not kosher and being okay with it, interacting with not Jewish people and trusting not Jewish people and deconstructing that. And it just was a huge, for me, it was the loneliness is the word that always comes up. And that loneliness for me felt very detrimental. I mean, it definitely, would have, whenever I was going through a hard time, I felt like if there was no one I can talk to. Yes, there's organizations out there, but for me, I always felt like the organizations were geared more towards individuals that were struggling with like addictions. And I never wanted my treatment or my support to be focused on like symptoms, but rather like the root core. So it was very, very lonely. And I will say though, I did it. Like it was very tough. And it is. And again, I mean, I've been hospitalized suicide lady for suicide and each sort of treatment, and I had to every single time pick myself up and not count on anyone else. So although it was lonely, and I say this to like people that have reached out just throughout the years, I'm like, you kind of got to pick yourself up. Like however hard it is, and there are organizations and there are resources, like you have to take responsibility. Just like I can't say, oh, it wasn't my parents' fault because my parents were abused. At this point, I can't also say, well, it's not my fault because I was abused, right? Like, or because of where I came from. Yes, it can be difficult, but you got to take ownership of your life. And I say that, and I always sound so harsh when I say that. I'm like so unempathetic, but I'm like, but I've experienced it. And it's really taking responsibility and ownership for your own life is so important. And I will say that again, I found support along the way. I've had people along the way, but that's not what got me to where I am today, which is, like I said, a beautiful marriage, run my own business, leaving tomorrow on a 3-month road trip out west to go explore like the whole out west. I mean, we've lived in 7 different states. I mean, I make do very well, own 2 homes. I mean, very successful because I did it myself, not because anyone picked it up. And I think that's something, again, that I say time and time again when people text me or message me. It's like, I don't want to keep hearing, again, I know I'm sounding so rough, but it's like at a certain point, I want, like, I get the addiction. I get that, but you got to pick yourself up and you got to make the changes, and you can. So that's my spiel.
Wow.
Yes, queen.
Yeah, that's my spiel. I'm very passionate about that. Like you got to do the work. Got to do it.
Yeah. Who's next?
I can jump in. I've been talking to a lot of people since my stuff went live 3 days ago. Somebody said something so beautiful. He said, people are willing to follow their truth until it becomes an inconvenience. And I finished the sentence with, to other people. The way that we're raised in these communities, especially as women, is our responsibility is to take care of everybody else. And so when we start entering these moments of doubt and discomfort, it took me 10 years to do a 180 of my life. And so much of the reason it took so long is because I made a commitment to my husband. I made a commitment to my children. I made a commitment to my community. How can I let all of those people down? Was so important. It was like, because that's what I was trained for my whole life, to consider everybody else. And it was only once I started teaching my children that your discomfort, other people's discomfort should never come at the expense of your own. Like, you need to make sure you're okay first. And the more I leaned into that with my children, the more I realized, like, I should probably do that to myself. And yes, what you're doing is going to be inconvenient for other people. Yes, other people are going to get hurt. But if you don't take care of yourself, ain't any mealy, right? Like, let's use the Torah here. If I'm not for me, then who will be? And to what Tia's saying, I need to make sure I'm okay first. Not because it's good for everybody else, but because it's good for me, because I am worthy of being taken care of. I am enough that I can be okay. Not for anybody else, just for me. Now, the snowball effect is that I'll be a more effective, happy, healthy human, so I can be better for everybody around me. But it's enough to say I am enough and I deserve to be okay. So follow your truth, past the inconvenience. How do you get through the inconvenience? Find support.
I guess I will say that if I knew all the repercussions that would happen, I have no regrets. I'm very grateful for where I am today, but I know that if I would have known all the repercussions, I probably would not have had the courage to leave. So I just want to name the price that I paid and the price that people in these type of communities can potentially pay. And again, no regrets. I'm so grateful for my life and so grateful for the courage I had and the choices I made. But ultimately for me, it was very multi-step. People like ask me what was the moment. Like it was multi-step. It was, first of all, leaving my marriage, which of course there were a few steps before that. Seeing a therapist for the first time, 7 years before I left my marriage, starting college. At that point, I had no sense of self or I was completely enmeshed and embedded in what was expected of me. And there was like no way I could even imagine. But, getting a job, going to college, and then ultimately like leaving my marriage. In some ways, that was a bigger deal for me, even than leaving the community. But leaving the marriage for me meant losing relationships with most of my children and my family of origin, because they did not want me to do that. They wanted me to stay in the marriage. So, that was number one. When I left, I was still in the community. I was still observant. I will say the betrayal of what I experienced from rabbis and from my family, of course, kind of opened up a world where I started questioning, because I wouldn't dare question before. There was too many layers of denial. Like there was no way I would question. At the beginning, I will say, like I had support. I was working with rabbis instead of family court. And I had a whole bunch of women who came in support of me, who were too afraid to speak to the rabbis publicly, but spent, an afternoon in private with the rabbis to kind of vouch for me to get custody of my children. Ultimately, they tried to take away all my children from me, ended up in a, long drawn out custody battle. And then when I came out as not observant, right, a lot of it, was through my writing. I really, at that point, did not have relationships with too many people in the community. And then when I started doing the education advocacy, that really branded me like as an enemy, which is like, just talks to the amount of kind of brainwashing that happens in the community, that they truly believe that because, I advocated and it was able to push forward an issue of improving education for children in the community, that, that makes me that traitor who spoke up against what was going on in the community. So at this point, I will say, people do reach out to me, but I'm also a little bit of a warning to people of what happens when you go down this path. And again, like, I want to make it clear, like, I don't have no regrets. I am so grateful, like, I had the courage, and I'm so grateful, like, the freedom that I have, like, literally every moment. It's a completely different life. And I just had my 16th grandchild. My grandchildren do not know that I am their grandmother, and I love them dearly, and they're paying the price as much as I'm paying the price.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Chavie, I know you have to go soon, so I want to hear from you, as well as the resources that you have in your Linda Listen. And then if you need to take off, you can do that.
Okay, I'm going to try to cram it all in really quickly. First of all, I feel so privileged to be sharing the space with all these incredible women. I'm just like so blown away by what we've all accomplished. Holy shit. Pardon me.
Yeah.
So I curse too easily now. It was bottled up for too long. So I left the community 13 years ago, and I've talked about this in the last interview I did, where, it was an awful time. Like, I left the community and everybody turned against me, and they fought me for custody of my children, and they put all their resources and all of their energy into this big, huge battle. I was so poor and so scared and so alone, with no family support and no community support and no money, and this, like, what felt like a war for my children. Like, I just wanted to save the babies. I just wanted them to have the opportunity to have choice for themselves. And in the past 2 years or 3 years, I feel like finally I started to feel what had been done to me. Like, it started to really feel alive in me. Whereas until now I was just in survival, put the one foot in front of the other, just do the next thing. And once I started to feel the enormity of, like, holy shit, holy goodness, I was, so young when I had these children, and I'm also like one of 10 children. I have 9 siblings. And so I went straight from being in a house full of children and chaos to, like, a marriage and my own children and taking care of them and taking care of my community and constantly thinking about other people. And I just started to have this, like, crisis of identity. Like, where am I in all of this? And who am I underneath this, like, caregiver person? And I started to get really resentful of all of these people that needed me, resentful of this role that I was thrust into. And like also feeling like there was no way out. Like when people are forced to have children so early, before they're fully developed as people, now they're just trapped for the rest of their lives, because otherwise, what are you doing to your children? Like it's just such a catch 22. And I climbed through those last few years, and now all three of my children are in college. So this fall, my baby went to college, and I was able to start, like, for the first time ever, thinking about myself. I have an empty nest now. I'm 43 years old and I have an empty nest. And I moved upstate to like live on a farm, and I go to college myself now. I started school this fall. I'm getting my bachelor's. This is a resource that I want to share, is that Bard College, where I'm a student, has a program for adult students who didn't have access to traditional education, where they have a full scholarship for your bachelor's. And so if you don't have a bachelor's degree yet and you're over, I think, 26, Bard College, gorgeous campus, beautiful education. I'm having the time of my life. I'm studying philosophy. I'm like just spending my time with young, energetic people who are so excited to talk about ideas and like how we live and what matters. And so it's a great way to just kind of find a slice of a space for myself and for my thoughts. That's not about my trauma, but that's just an investment in my brain that feels just so magical and special and lucky. And the price I paid to get here is ridiculously high, and like what everybody else shared here, like it's not fair and it's not okay. And I saved my children, and also they are now, they bear the scars of the trauma of what their entire childhoods have been, the family that they've been cut off from, the larger community that they should have access to that they don't, the sense of identity and self that we now are forced to like create for ourselves, because the beautiful rich tradition we come from was stolen from us by fundamentalism and extremism. And so there's just a lot of pain and trauma. And my advice to the same kind of, I think everybody kind of is saying the same advice, but the framing that I like to use is, what I realized in the past few years is I know how to do this for my children. I know how to do impossible things for my children. And also I have such generosity, like, of spirit towards my children, in terms of like, if they're struggling with something, my heart goes to, they've been through so much, these poor babies, they shouldn't have to go to a job, or they shouldn't have to deal with whatever, the responsibilities of life. These poor, sweet babies who it's my entire job to protect and heal and nurture. And if their mental health is suffering, I'm just like, oh, I see so clearly how they're just these beautiful beings who deserve tenderness and care and nurturing. And I don't have the kind of judgments towards them that I have towards myself or other people that I encounter that I've been brainwashed to have all these kind of stories around laziness and all these other things. And so what I've started to do is try to turn that on myself. And I don't want to sound too woo-woo, but it works on me, and I'm not a woo-woo person, but I'm also a baby. I was born and live in this body, and also deserve a mother who thinks of me the way I think about my children. And the person who's best suited to give that to this baby is me. I can be a really good mother to me because I know myself really well and I have capacity to do this. And I guess the Linda, listen, if you're in a situation, can I go right into it, or should I wait for everybody? Okay, Linda, listen. If you're in a situation where you're feeling stuck, or the choices seem like one terrible one and another terrible one, or where you're feeling like the next step is just going to lead to another terrible thing. I guess I just said that. Remember that you are your own baby's best parent, and this baby deserves a magical life. It's the one life that this baby gets to have. And so this baby deserves opportunity and options and freedom. And if the options in front of you don't seem right, it's because we're looking too small. Like, I like to tell this to people. It's like, you don't know what's on the other side of the mountain until you climb the first mountain. And then you see, oh, wait, there's another whole mountain after that of huge possibility, but you don't know it until you get up that first mountain. And so give that baby all the opportunity, climb that mountain, get over the top. Or like, for people struggling with mental health stuff, like there's so many ways of living that you don't even know yet. The religious community or fundamentalist spaces have such limited ideas of how life should look. And maybe you don't fit into that life, and there's very few options within that life, but there are people dancing in forests just living their own kind of freedom. There are people who have stepped completely off of this whole entire, they've stepped out of all of these cults. I haven't found them yet, and I don't know yet where my place is, but right now I'm in a small liberal arts college where there's room for someone like me to find joy talking about philosophy. And I didn't know that this was a way that I might enjoy being 43 years old, but you don't know what's possible until you just give yourself permission to take that baby and give it the world, and you deserve it. And I believe in you, and I want the best for all of you.
Oh my goodness. Beautifully said, Chavie. That was amazing. I know you have to go. Do you have any other resources that you want to share and or social media handles or where people can find you and support you before you leave?
Thank you so much. Thank you for being my timekeeper. I appreciate it so much. So I now have a website. I don't know if I had this the last time we talked. So I have a website, chavieweisberger.com. It's how it's spelled, probably under this
in the description.
Okay, chavieweisberger.com. If you want to reach out to me to hire me for a speaking gig or to do, I do like coaching for parents if you're interested in that kind of support. I would be so happy to hear from you. I know the last time I did an interview, a lot of people reached out to me and I didn't respond to you all, but it's also because I was really not doing well and I was like mentally not okay. And so please don't take it personally if I didn't respond to you last time. Maybe I'll respond this time. I would like to. I'm doing better now. And the other resources, I want to give a shout out to Footsteps, where I'm currently employed. Footsteps supports folks who are raised in the Hasidic Jewish community or in ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities who are looking to transition to a life of their choosing. We also offer a monthly support group that's open to folks of other fundamentalist experiences so that we can all be together and get some support. So footstepsorg.org, reach out if we can be a support to you. You deserve it. You deserve to have all the resources available to you.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming back, Chavie. It was so great to see you again after 3 years. I can't believe it's been that long. Oh, did we lose her? How funny that we lost Chavie right at that moment. Let's get everybody's Linda Listen moment, and then we'll talk about how everyone can find you and support you. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I can go first. I can speak now. So I just want to say, like, the thing that was coming to mind for me is that, yes, freedom can come at a high cost, but it's priceless. So that's kind of something to look forward to. It is priceless. There is nothing like releasing those shackles of oppression. And it's worth it. Another thing I want to say is, because I've been hearing this a lot from people, is there's a sense of like, and I think it happens a lot when you come from an insular community, there's the community I come from and then the rest of the world, right? So, it's like my community and then everything else. There are so many ways to live and there are so many ways to be. So if you stepped out and experimented with something and it felt so wrong and so awful, there's like so many different opportunities. There's so many different ways to leave. That's not a reason not to leave because you haven't found a perfect fit for yourself. There are so many ways to be, and take the opportunity. Yeah.
Yes. Where can people find and support you, Beatrice?
Oh, thank you. So right now I write on my Substack. That is my main way I communicate with people. I'm also on all the social media spaces that you can find me at Beatrice Weber. I'd love a follow on Substack. That's where I love to write and share both my experiences. I think it's important. I think our voices of people who have been through this life experience need to be elevated. People in the community need to feel like they're being heard. People on the outside need to know what's going on. So I write about my experiences, but I also write about my life now, what it looks like to heal. And I am writing a memoir, which hopefully will find a publisher very soon, that my agent will be successful. But for now, Substack, and I will send you the link, which you can put in the description below.
Perfect. That's so exciting. Congrats on that. Okay. Who wants to go next with the Linda Listen?
I can go next.
Okay.
My Linda Listen is, the number one thing I hear from people all the time is, it's not a cult. You can just leave. We just heard from so many people, the cost of leaving is so, so high for all of us. None of us did this because we wanted to. We did this kicking and screaming, and because we ultimately had no choice. We were all in some capacity dying inside and needed to get out. So Linda, listen, it is not a choice. And those of us who did it are so fucking brave. And we're speaking out so that other people in those positions of hopelessness and helplessness can know that you're not the first to do this. There's people who walked before you, who paved the way, and there are resources and people to help and to listen. So while it's such a high price to pay of a choice. You can do it. It's there. It's available.
Yes. How can people find and support you?
So I'm like so new to just talking about this. I'm on Instagram, Permission to Be Yourself. Reach out, DM me. I'm happy to talk. I'm in the process of writing a book. My goal is to come back on to promote it. We'll see how long that takes.
Yes.
And yeah, I'm just happy to talk and be a resource for people.
Perfect. Okay, T.
My Linda listen moment, I had to think about it because I didn't think about it beforehand, but is that this moment, this experience, this month, years of challenge, whatever you're going through won't last forever. So always remember that. And that you matter to make the change. So whatever that negative experience is, you matter, and you can make that change so that your other experiences can be positive and you can live the life you want to live. And then people can find me just on Instagram, Chavie T. Murrin, just on Instagram is the best place.
Amazing. Wow. This was such a great panel. I knew it was going to be so many insights and real raw emotion, thoughts, opinions. I loved it. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we go, or anything we didn't cover that you're like, oh, I just wanted to say this one thing to somebody, or what are you guys thinking?
I think I have one final thought for other people that have not been in the community or are first encountering someone who maybe has been in the community and no longer in the community or is currently in the community. I think one thing I have to say is definitely be patient and be patient and kind of enjoy witnessing their first experiences, their new experiences, but also be patient because sometimes when you leave, you don't realize what the norm is. You don't realize that an experience that you're having is a typical experience for most people, but for you, it all feels new. So I think just the one thing that I say, for people that are outside is really just try to be patient for those that are either in the community or that you just left, that you just met, who have just left the community.
Yeah.
That reminded me of a final thought that I wanted to make also to the greater community. When somebody tells you, I left a cult, don't challenge them. Don't tell them, oh, but I know that community. That's not true. Listen to the people's lived experience because it's theirs, it's true, it's real, and they know their experience better than you know about their experience. So when somebody says, I left a high demand, I left a cult, I left a space, listen with curiosity and with openness and not with judgment.
Absolutely agree. I think especially with that, because people have such different experiences from one to another. For some, it may be extremely controlling because they're following all the rules and doing everything they're supposed to. For others, it's like, yeah, I kind of do it and I kind of don't, and it's fine, it's great. And so for them, it doesn't feel like a cult. And for others, it absolutely is. So I think you're spot on, and trust the people who are telling you their story. Don't challenge it, because not only does it invalidate their experience, it makes them question their entire experience. And they shouldn't have to be questioning themselves or their story for some random person who tries to take that away from them. 100% agree. Beatrice, do you have any other final thoughts before we go?
I want to name the fact that this is a sect within the Jewish community. And I just need to name, because lately I have been getting like virulently anti-Semitic comments on my page. And I just want to say that fundamentalism exists in every single religion and in every single group. And it is way more similar the way we practiced, right? Let's note, this 5% of Jewish people, the way we practice is a lot more similar to how evangelical and Mormons and, it is Islamist Muslim practice than the rest of the Jewish world practices. So I really want to name this unique experience. That's, again, I found a lot of camaraderie and understanding people who have left other fundamentalist groups. And really, that's where we need to be placed. So when you hear about all these rules, right, that we spoke about, the purity laws, the Shabbat, the kosher, literally, the estimates vary, but between 5 to 9% of Jewish people adhere to those kind of practices. It literally is a minority. The vast majority of Jews are progressive, have very liberal values, are very tolerant, and are really at the forefront of so much of what is good in this world.
Yes. Thank you so much for saying that and for clarifying, especially at the end. We do get a lot of comments or people misunderstanding what we're speaking about or the different sects that we're speaking about or the fundamentalism. So I'm so glad that you said that. Just the other day, I think it was on the live, I just did. Maybe it was with you, Raquel, or someone was like, wow, you're really just talking about a lot of Jewish people lately, and it's a minority of people that live this way. And I was like, well, first of all, two that we've been talking about lately. But the point is, it doesn't matter if it's 2 people or 100 people or 1,000 people who are being harmed. If someone is being harmed, we need to give voice to that. We need to bring it to light. The impact of how many people we are speaking about or not speaking about, that doesn't matter. It's we want to bring light to something that is causing harm, whether that impacts you or not. So anyways, thank you for saying that, Beatrice. Thank you, ladies, for coming on and taking your time this evening to share with everybody. I really appreciate you guys.
And thank you for creating this platform for all of us.
Raquel, Toronto, when did you live in Toronto? I'm like, I did not ask it through the interview, but like my mind.
Are we done?
Are we done?
Wait, I need to do the outro. Hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were done.
Thank you guys so much for listening. We really appreciate you tuning into our 300th episode. This is a really big deal for us. It's a big deal to have these panels. Leave those words of encouragement down below for these women who are coming on and bravely sharing their stories. They're amazing. They took time out of their day to talk about some of the hardest parts of their life and to share with us their thoughts and opinions. And it is the best way to support the show, boosting the algorithm so more people can see this and become aware of these groups and red flags. If you want to support further, we have channel memberships where we are doing members-only live streams. We're doing early access to some of our videos. We also have a Patreon at patreon.com/cults2consciousness, merch at cults2consciousness.com. If you like this video, you are definitely going to want to check out all of their individual interviews and live streams. We are going to link them all in the description so you can find them. We'll link 2 down here so it's an easy click, and check out our 2 other panels as well. And with all of that said, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.